This is the Family Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Ronika Merl. That's how I say your last name, right?
That is right. Yeah.
I always want to make sure I get it right. And we welcome you to the Family Electric Ghost podcast. We're actually talking to you from Ireland, right?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me on. I am in Ireland, in Dublin. It is 2 a.m. here. It is very cold, but let's get going because I'm ready.
Well, that's awesome. So we always ask every guest that's ever come on the show, we ask a couple sets of questions before we get into your story. So one of the things I'll ask you is like, what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
What motivates me? The my main motivation, I guess, is the badness. I've experienced quite a lot of like really really bad things. And I guess what always kept me going, and I have to differentiate two different motivations here. So the first thing that kept me going was, oh my God, I've done all this. If it doesn't lead anywhere now, what was it all for? What was it
Mhm.
all worth? So that is kind of that's the oldest motivation I have. Is like it has to be worth something. I have to suffer for something. It has to pour out into something and turn into something good, please. Um, and that's a kind of unhealthy motivation that I probably shouldn't hold on to. My second motivation is curiosity. I'm so curious. I am so curious about what happens next.
Mhm.
I want to see what else I can learn, what else I can see, where else I can go. The people I've not met yet, that drives me. All the art I haven't seen yet, all the art I haven't created yet, all the stories I haven't told yet. So that second part I think is a little bit more healthier. um so if I had to pin it down to what motivates me, it's that I know that there's something still lurking,
Mhm.
um and I want to see what it is.
Well, I think that's a prime mover for a lot of creative people, especially authors. And I would,
Yeah.
being a screenwriter, put you in like the author
Yeah.
writer category. Um, but you also run the Wicklow Stories Film Festival, so that's cool.
Yeah.
That we'll talk about that. But as a screenwriter, like, did you start like with screenwriting, or you start with like writing in general, and
um
go into
I
screenwriting?
I started writing when I was very, very young. So I kind of wrote my first little stories as a kid. And then but I always really wanted to work in film. So like from a very young age, I knew that cinema was something that I really, really just loved very,
Mm,
very deeply. I loved going to the cinema. I loved movies. I loved the whole experience. So I always kind of knew in the back of my head that I was going to end up in film eventually. But you don't really, or I didn't really start with screenwriting as such, until I was in my late 20s. So until 2019, 2020 really is when I started. Great time to
mhm,
start anything, really. Um, but I was a writer before then. I had written a couple of essays. I'd written a lot of poetry, um, and I was writing a novel, and I was failing miserably at it because I'm just very lazy.
mhm.
And novel writing requires a lot of work. Um, and I
World
was
building.
really struggling. Yeah,
There's a lot of world building and character
so
development that goes on
much.
for
Oh
pages and
my
pages.
God, you have to write everything. Whereas in screenwriting, it's the wonderful thing that I love about filmmaking is that it's a collaborative effort. So as a screenwriter, I am able to give the skeleton, but then I don't have to describe the clothes that the character is wearing in detail.
Oh, the
That's
directors
the
can.
costume designer's job to figure
Yeah,
out.
they
Do you
can
know what I
figure
mean? I
that out.
don't have to write down every expression. That's the actor's job to have that freedom to express themselves. Um, so if I have to be completely honest with myself, maybe I was just not didn't have enough stamina for
Mhm.
novel writing and switched
But
into
but
screenwriting.
you still found a way to get the writing
The
done. It's
the
kinda like a
story out.
songwriter. Songwriters rewrite stories, but they're not, they're 5 minutes long, maybe 11 minutes long back
Yeah.
in the '70s. But
Mhm.
it's like we have a short time frame. But
Yeah.
you might be like, "Well, who can write stories in 5 minutes?" Well, songwriters do, But
Songwriters can. Yeah.
but that's so it's like I can't keep it going for a novel, but I can keep it going for 5 minutes.
Yeah, maybe we're the same in that way.
Yeah.
Maybe I agree with you. Maybe it's just but it is an entirely different art form as well. And the more I kind of fell in love with screenwriting, the more I realized that it is just the art form that I express myself best
Mhm.
in. I fell very naturally into it. And I started working in the industry kind of in 2022, and I've been going ever since. So it's kind of my third year. Um, so yeah, screenwriting was something I had always kind of looked forward to. I knew it was in my future at some point, and then you know I just kind of started and allowed myself to stop waiting for something else to happen and just go with the actual original dream. Um, so yeah,
Well, you've done about 22 feature-length scripts, and that's a good amount.
yeah,
And on top of that, like, well, your latest work is called Matriarchy, and it was a
yes,
TV adaptation of Mary Mackey's Earthsong. Is
yes.
that,
I get to talk about it now. I don't get to say much about it, but it is what a fantastic project. What excited me most about this project was that it was based in archaeology. So it was based in a lot of like real archaeological findings. The novel is an absolutely fantastic story. It was written in the 80s, and it's a very early, very feminist kind of approach to historical fact.
mm,
And I don't get to say a lot about
okay,
it,
yeah,
because it's still all very much under wraps. But I got to write story. I got to write a story about womanhood and about masculinity.
mm.
Which masculinity is such a fascinating topic to me because the masculinity that's on display in that story is so healthy.
Oh, it's healthy.
It's such a
The
healthy,
opposite of what we see
beautiful thing.
today.
Yes, and but masculinity is a beautiful thing. I know we're going off topic here, but I because I always want to talk about it, because it's such a gorgeous thing. Men are amazing people, right? And you don't hear many feminists say that, but we
Yeah,
should be
well, because of
saying it.
toxic masculinity has kinda,
Is
I guess,
it always told? Yeah,
framed the worldview
I
because of all the
agree.
bad stories.
Yeah,
Nobody wants to talk. It's kinda what happens to the good
exactly.
guys. We're
Yeah,
boring. Like, if you're the guy that's not causing trouble, then you don't get the headline, so nobody knows about you.
but that's not, and it that you use the phrase there. Masculinity nowadays is always discussed with that prefix of toxic masculinity.
Yeah,
But not all masculinity is. I think masculinity is a beautiful, gorgeous, gorgeous, wonderful thing. Men are amazing people, and to celebrate that and to celebrate what it means to be a man, that's great. We should be doing that more because men are capable of such amazing, wonderful things. And I was very, very lucky to be able to really dive into that and really,
that's
really
cool.
work with that and express that in that story. So that's what really excited me about that project.
Which
It was
I
a
think that's
challenge.
great thing about writing, is that you can bring different perspectives and
Yeah.
maybe things that people aren't talking about. You can
Yeah.
make that suddenly the topic that people can get into, and that's why
Yeah.
I've
And
always been, interested in people who aren't doing cookie cutter, right?
yes. Oh
The
no.
people
Yeah. Yeah.
who try to do something and put a spin on it that maybe is not the common spin, or the
Yeah.
common interpretation, because that's the whole point. When I was a kid, I watched Orson Welles like Citizen Kane, and I was like, "That's a movie. That's like a real." And then I watched some. I got so into it. I watched like interviews with Orson Welles talking about
Mm.
it,
Mm.
and this guy asked him, "Is like, well, how did you know to do this?" And then Orson Welles said, "Well, I didn't know what you couldn't do." As a
Yeah.
director, he said there's a
You don't
famous
know
interview where he said he didn't know what you couldn't do, so he did things with the camera that people said, "Well, that's not what you're supposed to do." And I said, "Well, why not?"
yeah, it works. It
Yeah,
worked out. I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you. The point of art is to push boundaries. Nobody can tell you how to write a song. You might have ways that make you feel more comfortable to write a song because that's how you write your specific music. But nobody could ever write or perform in the same way that you specifically can, right? It's just not possible. You could clone yourself and raise that clone in exactly the same way that you were raised. It was still wouldn't be able to create
Yeah.
exactly the
Still
same music
never.
that you do.
Well, that's the
Like,
thing. Yeah,
yeah,
because people don't, well, and the only problem today is like when you go and you sample and you use in the box, which like,
yeah,
so you'll see some bands today and they go on a live concert and they're like, that sounds exactly like the song I hear on the radio
yeah,
because they're actually not really playing live. A lot of the tracks
yeah,
are right from the master.
yeah,
And
yeah.
to me, that's kind of cheating because I'm kind of from the days like if I'm going to go on stage, I want it to be in
Yeah.
the moment. Like if I'm
Mhm.
going to read a poem, like I wrote it, but when I go to read it, it's how I read it in that moment that makes it
Yeah.
different for that performance.
Yes,
Why would
yes.
I want to make it the same every night? You probably
No,
would
no, no,
want,
and because it shouldn't be, because it should be a reflection of how you feel on the day. It should be a reflection of what you have for breakfast. Maybe that's a bit
yeah,
extreme, but you know what I mean? The emotion, and that's why it's really, really difficult to be a live musician, especially. I love music. I've always been around musicians. I was a musician when I was a teenager. So I know the feeling of going up on stage and performing something and then going up on stage the next evening, and the song or the piece speaks to you completely differently
yeah. Well, you
because
can evolve it.
you're
You can
because you
evolve
just got
yourself.
your heart broken that day, and all of a sudden that line that wasn't really a heartbreaking line the day before makes you bawl your eyes out, because that's what humanity is. That's what and but the privilege that we as artists have is that I always feel like our emotions sit just a tiny bit closer to the surface,
Oh
right?
yeah, the
So
vulnerability, right?
yeah,
Because the whole point is like they of an artist is like you're willing to be vulnerable.
exactly. We have to be. You have to be in order to just um in order to bleed out that creativity and that, like you say, vulnerability and the art. It's so when you have those raw moments in a performance, that's where the magic is, right?
Oh yeah,
That's where the actual
that's
spark
what the
happens.
beauty is.
The
Like I always
beauty,
call it like
exactly.
the happy accident, right? Like
Yes.
because a lot of times like I'm a real devotee of like the old style recording,
Mhm.
and this is like in the 70s and 80s, 60s. Like bands would go in, like you think about like Neil Young and Crazy Horse, they would just go, just turn the multi track on, and just play.
Yeah.
And then they go back and listen to the tapes and say, "Here, oh, these
Yeah.
are the gems."
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
sometimes they just leave them the way they were.
Yeah.
For example, with the same there's a lot of famous artists that will say, "Yeah, I mean, it was on the 3rd take." That's the
Mm.
3rd take. We just we had better takes
Mhm.
technically, but the
Mhm.
3rd take actually might not be perfect. The mic's not perfect. Somebody might hear my belt buckle or my
Yeah.
buttons on my jacket hitting something, but it doesn't matter because that one has the magic.
The magic and the emotion. And
Yeah.
in filmmaking, it's the exact same thing where I work with I direct sometimes, and it the rawness of the first draft or an early draft, let's say, um, because the first, like, let's call it the first draft. It might be an early draft. The first draft is such a pouring out,
It's
and it's
closer
so
to the truth
unedited.
of what you were
Yeah,
trying to do.
it's the original spark. It's so organic, and it's so kind of it's the potato with the dirt still on it. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's
yeah.
so real. It's so real. You just pulled it out of the earth, and it smells so good. Um, so it's that rawness of and then you edit yourself, and then you homogenize it, and then you pasteurize it, and then you change it up, and then you make it worthy of the radio. And mm, I
Start to
don't
lose.
know.
I think you
I don't
start to
know.
lose it. That's why I like the punk aesthetic.
Yeah.
Like the punk aesthetic was this like a wildly like innovative concept because you had all these, by the time you get to the late 70s, you had these like big progressive rock bands, the bands like Zeppelin, they were like perfect.
Mhm.
Yeah, like singers that were beyond what people could do, right? A regular guy couldn't go out and be Robert Plant.
Yeah.
Regular guy couldn't go out and do what Roger Daltrey was doing or do what
Mm.
John Lennon or anybody. People were like on these levels.
Yeah.
But then when you get the Ramones, where you get
Yeah.
the Talking
Yeah.
Heads, you get Patti
Yeah.
Smith, you get Blondie, you get these bands. It's like, hey, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like
Yeah.
you could actually come out there with like the Clash, Joe Strummer.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, everybody's saying, well, that's the only band that matters, but it's like the fact that they could come out there and when he had like bands like Yes and Zeppelin, like Joe Strummer wasn't gonna sing at that level, but he
Yeah.
sang at a different level. It was raw and immediate.
Raw and authentic and true to what he was, true to his particular voice and everything else. So we have to allow ourselves as artists, I think we have to allow ourselves to be just yourself, unfiltered.
Hmm.
And I think it comes with age. I think it really does because the older I get, the less I care about what people think of me. And it's such a wonderful thing. And I really don't care. Like I genuinely from the bottom of my heart do not care if somebody doesn't like me.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter. Like it really doesn't matter. Whereas growing up and especially kind of as a teenager and stuff like
and it
that,
matters then.
oh,
Yeah.
you care. You care so much. You really
Well, it's about
do.
kind of being safe. We got this little kind of
Yeah.
tribal thing. It's like back in the day, if you got put outcast from the tribe, then the
Mm,
wolves and the saber
yeah.
tooths and all the crazy creatures out in the
Yeah.
woods were going to get you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then this idea like you got to conform to stay safe.
Mm,
And
yeah.
even though the wolf's not at the door, well, the wolf is at the door with that your triggered psychological wolf is at
Yeah.
the door.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so then you
No.
feel like there's still the need to be safe. So you play it safe
Yeah.
so you don't get hurt because you think you're going to die if you're not playing safe.
Exactly, but I think we need to I think that is one of the challenges that we have as artists is that we need to push beyond that fear. It is paramount that we do.
Mhm.
I think that it's the role of the artist within society is that we need to overcome the fear and dare to be different and dare to be even the outcast. We're not really outcast. Like I don't ever feel like I don't belong in society. I'm pretty
It's like the
happy
law of
with
attraction, right?
but
Like if you
yeah,
put something out there, you'll find a new tribe, right?
you'll find a new tribe. You'll find your tribe. And finding your tribe is has become such a phrase. And found family obviously has become such a thing since, most kind of traditional families aren't really that close knit anymore, or you move around a lot, or time zones and the pressures of modern life and all that. And the pandemic had a lot to do with it as well.
Mhm.
So a lot of people are kind of you talk to your roommates more often than you talk to your parents or your siblings, and you have to have roommates because you can't afford to live on
Yeah,
your own. Do you know what I mean? So we
yeah,
we
yeah,
we are restructuring society in such a way that feeling of village,
yeah.
is kind of
Like kind of
is
art
portrayed in different ways.
commune is like the 1976. You had the art commune,
Yeah,
and then
I lived in a commune for a summer when I was 15. And it was the best. It was so much fun. It was an amazing. It
we
was
have
yeah, it was
collectives today. Like I know a lot of bands that are in collectives.
yeah,
Because it's like the power of the many. Because like you go to
yeah,
the club and you're in a collective of 10 bands, you got to highlight, you got likely it's more of a chance you're going to get booked for the whole night or
yeah,
for the next couple of days. So that you can kind of own that club versus if you go there as a single band, an individual
yeah,
band is like, owner say, I don't know you. I don't know
yeah,
you. Don't have any fan. Be coming in with a collective that has fans
yeah,
and merch, and then
yeah.
you have your tribe you're going with. Then
Exactly, and
found your people.
your fans become part of that, and your audience becomes a part of that, and it's a redefinition of what community really means. And most of our communities have moved online. So your best friend might be somebody you've never met in real life, but they are your best friend because you talk to them every day online. And that's kind of a shift that's happened over the last, I don't know, like 20 years
Mhm.
in society. I, I think we do still need real life connections as well.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
because
physical
especially as
connection.
musicians, I think if we learned anything during COVID, it's that we need live performances. We need to be in a room with people, and especially music is like poetry is another thing that needs
You
live
need that
performance.
life. Yeah.
But music, I think, I mean, there is just nothing that compares to being in a room with people, and it might just be 10 people, it might just be
Yeah.
5, it doesn't
But
matter.
yeah, it doesn't have to be the big festival
Mm,
crowd. In fact, that
yeah.
might be less that's
Uh-huh.
almost as antiseptic as
Mhm.
actually being online. Because
Yeah.
I'd rather be in a club with like 100, 200 people, small club,
Yeah.
versus being like 10 on stage on a big thing like a Coachella. Not that you wouldn't wanna
Yeah.
do that as a musician, though, yeah, everybody
Yeah.
wants to do that, but if I'm actually in a more intimate setting, like a CBGB's back
Yeah.
in the day, where,
If
like the Viper Room, you get certain small clubs
yeah.
just have more of an appeal because you feel like you connect with that crowd. It goes back and forth.
And exactly that's exactly what I was going to say. It's like it's that exchange of energy that and I really think like performance and but by performance I mean everything: storytelling, music, dance, poetry. Those are the things that made us human. Like we became human the moment one of us stood up around a fire somewhere
So
in,
this talk this story, the oral
and
histories,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly 200,000 years ago, before we were even human, before we were even considered to be actually human, one of us stood up and started dancing, or one of us
mhm,
stood up and started singing, or started telling a story with whatever proto language there was, with gestures and ideas and emotions. um, that's when we became human. So in a very, very real, in a very, very kind of real way for me, when you stand up on stage and you perform your music, you're doing something that is older than humanity itself.
yeah, it's
And you're
very ancient.
celebrating, yeah. Yeah, you're celebrating something that I think created humanity. um and you're I think it's an unbroken tradition of performance and of art and of it sharing emotion, that without that humans wouldn't be human. We just wouldn't be, we wouldn't have made it this far. So I'm always very proud to take part in in that tradition, whether it's as an audience member or whether it's as a performer. um and to kind of, every time I go on a stage, I take a moment to kind of remember that I am doing something that is quintessentially human, um, and that
I
kind of
think
grounds me in the moment.
I
Yeah,
think it makes people, look into
yeah,
like a deeper self. Like every time somebody listens to a song,
yeah,
the songwriter wrote it, but now the audience like owns it
yeah.
because
Yes,
they get the interpretation that they feel from whatever the songwriter wrote.
yeah,
And they get that picture in their mind, they get the cinematic every
yeah,
time I listen to music, I get like a sound painting.
yeah,
I get
yeah,
like a
yeah, yeah.
cinematic view. If I'm
Yes,
listening to Dylan and I listen to a song like Idiot Wind, I'm, like, seeing this whole, like, movie because
I mean, and Dylan
he's
is
very cinematic in the way he talks, the
oh,
way he
yeah,
actually
he's a
tells the
genius when
stories.
it comes to that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. His songs really do he's a storyteller.
Yeah,
He's
just
really a
massive
storyteller
stories.
at his core. So the way he uses language is absolutely, I mean, what a poet. What a genius poet. The best poet of the last century, without a doubt. Um, so yes, that's what art is. That's what music is. That's what we do. That's who we are. And I think it's a burden. It's not a burden, but it is a responsibility, I think, for us. Um, because without it, the world would be so gray and so unbearable, that we have to carry that torch,
Yeah.
to light the way. It's just what we have to do. If you're born with this kind of internal flame, then you have to keep it going. um, so whenever life gets a little bit hard, and whenever I think like, oh, I should just go back to my desk job and just forget about it, I remember that no, actually, I have a responsibility to keep this going, because I was blessed with this gift of being able to tell stories, so I should.
I think it's really good to have stories coming from not just, like, mainstream kind of top down, coming from big
Mm,
studios. Because being in the kind of indie world, I
mm,
started the podcast focusing on the independent and emerging artists.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
mostly female independent singer songwriters because I
yeah,
thought they weren't being paid attention to.
yeah,
So a lot of my initial interviews, like 70% of the people I'm talking to are emerging female singer
yeah,
songwriters because I
yeah,
felt like they needed to be have have the spotlight because nobody was, people weren't focusing.
yeah,
And I just think that, like in film or movies, that when you have voices that are maybe on the outside, kind
yeah,
of like the underground,
yeah,
I'm always been an advocate for this underground indie. Anything I was into, I was always listening. At first, bands I was listening to, like the Velvet Underground. I
yeah,
was listening to, like bands that weren't
yeah,
known, like
yeah,
art,
yeah.
like other producers knew who they were,
Mhm,
but like general fans, like, well, I don't know who they are. Like
mm.
Alex Chilton, big stars, like nobody knows who they are, but like other producers know who they are.
Yeah, and but I think the thing is, it as an independent kind of, artist, or as somebody, I work in independent film mainly, um, is it's really, really difficult to find that kind of balancing ground of, this is a really important story that we need to tell, but also how do we scrape together enough money to be able to tell it? Especially in film, like film is such a money dependent business.
Mhm.
And it really is, like, is a business. As is music. Um so it's a difficult balance to strike, to say, okay, this is a story that in its raw nature is will not find backing. So we're gonna have to edit it down to be a little bit more, friendly to the pocketbook of the investors, which is always a heartbreaking moment. But you
You have
do
to
have to
balance.
play the
It
game to a
is.
certain extent, and you do have to be business savvy. You have to be, I think, I- most artists who are successful, or who find their audience, have a certain degree of business savviness, have a certain degree, like yourself. You've been going for so long with this podcast. You're promoting yourself. You're doing all of these amazing things. You're really putting yourself out there. You are working really, really hard to so that your audience may find you. That's a business decision that you made there. That is, those
Yeah,
are those
that's
are
not the hard
business
part of it.
savvy
Yeah,
decisions,
yeah, it's
which
not the
you
hard
have
part.
to be. Yeah,
That's a
you
hard
have to
thing.
be.
I
Yeah,
think a lot of artists want is like, I just want to go in the studio and just write songs all day.
it
But then
doesn't,
when
but
you
it,
gotta go and do the AR, PR,
yeah,
A&R, and then you're like, I hate doing that." But it's like,
you
well, you gotta do some of it.
you gotta do something. I am up at 2 o'clock in the morning on a podcast. So we
Yeah,
have
you're
to do
doing it.
these things, right? And I love it. I love that I get to do it. Um, but we I think so. I have a friend, he's a fantastic musician. He's really, really great, but he doesn't play music outside of his bedroom. And I just wish that he would. I wish he
Mhm.
should be filling stadiums he's not.
Yeah. There's
Like,
some people,
he's so good,
they
but he
either
just
they don't,
sings.
they're so into just writing the song.
Yeah.
I know guys that are like, they just write, or they might be more production people, so they could be on stage, but they end up like sound engineering or something, and
Yeah.
it could be they're really good,
Yeah.
but they feel like, well, I'm more comfortable on a board.
Yeah. Which
But
is
you're
fine.
That's
That's
fine, but
fine.
you could actually be on stage, but you just like
You
you can't
don't
make
you
any.
don't yeah, you don't do it. And, like, also, like, kind of from more in my world, I know a lot of fantastic writers who just don't who write something and then put it in a drawer because they don't want to put themselves out there. And I
Mhm,
always find that very sad, because some of these stories should really be told, and some of these stories are should see the light of day, but they won't, because um I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just not wanting to put them out there. Maybe they just wrote it for themselves, which is also totally fine, of course.
mhm,
Making art for art's sake and just for yourself and for nobody else to see ever, also a wonderful, wonderful thing. Art is not art shouldn't be just for the
for
sellability of it.
consumption, yeah, yeah.
Um, but if you do want to become, um, if you do want to make a living off of this, whatever art form you choose to try and make a living off of, you do gotta you
Well,
do
you got to
gotta
market.
do the
Yeah,
thing. I
you
mean,
have to.
it's just so inevitable. Nobody's gonna
Yeah,
come into your bedroom and discover you. That's just not gonna happen. So you do have to strike that balance of like, do I create art just for art's sake and because it makes me happy and healthy, or do I want this to be my job? And if the former, if you just want to do art, like I paint, I'm not in a million years ever going to sell a painting. I don't care about my paint,
you
my
just do it.
visual arts. I don't care about it. It's just me, right? Um, so if you want to do art in that way, where it's just, this is just for me, I don't care, then that's awesome. That's fine. That's brilliant. But for me, just for me, I have to make a living.
Yeah, yeah,
So I do have to put myself out there, and but I enjoy it. I enjoy it because it puts me in the path of amazing, interesting people, and it lets me have these exact conversations where I keep smiling and I keep agreeing with you because I'm just so excited about everything you're saying because I agree with it so much. So we get to interact with, these amazing people, and these, and hear these amazing stories, and listen in on art being created, and that's just, I mean, that's just mind boggling. That's just amazing. That's just
yeah.
gorgeous.
Well, that's what I love about the podcast. I get to hear, all these stories from people around the world, and then bring them to the world. And maybe people wouldn't have heard that unless I asked somebody to show
Yeah,
up and tell the story. And so
yeah,
that's I like to be able to do that in the same way. That you have a venue that allows independent bands or filmmakers. Like I want to segue into your film festival, because when
yeah.
you have a film festival, then you can shed a light, and maybe you can talk about what the main goal of your Wicklow Stories Film Festival. What's the goal of that festival? What's the primary like?
Um, so for us it was the main reason that, we started that festival was, so Wicklow is a county here in Ireland that gets a lot of Hollywood. We get a lot of like big huge big Hollywood productions. We had Disney here a couple of years ago. Um and they transformed an entire village. They transformed the entire village into like a Disney Wonderland thing. And they spent $10 million just on set design to
Wow.
change that village. And they spent $1.2 million on fake flowers for that village,
Wow.
right? And I was like, how? How? Why? What? Um, and then that village featured for like maybe 2 minutes of the film.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
it's
so
interesting.
like insanity, just absolute insanity. Um, and just a couple of miles down the road, we were trying to get a short film off the ground, and our budget was €200, right?
Oh,
For the
wow.
whole short film, for a
So if
15-minute short film.
compared to
And
where
it
Disney's living, they're living in like this like different world zones, like another universe.
exactly, exactly. So we realized that local film, even though Hollywood was completely occupying every hotel in the county, what we saw is that independent filmmakers, is that young filmmakers didn't really have a seat at the table. There wasn't even a table for us to go to. There wasn't even anything for us to aspire to. So we were shooting this short film on the pier in Greystones, which is a beautiful like seaside town with like gorgeous scenery and just an amazing harbor and pier. Um, and we were shooting there, and we got the attention of my partner, my business partner Marlena, and she said, "Well, when can we see this film that's being made here? When can we see? Where can we see it?" And I'm like, "You're never gonna see it. It's probably gonna go up on YouTube. We don't really have an outlet for it. We
Hmm.
don't really have somewhere to put it." Um, So she was like, "Well, we should put it in the cinema. We have a little cinema here, in the Whale Theater. We have a little cinema. We should put it in there." And I was like, "I mean, Sure. Yeah, we should. Let's do that. Let's do that. At least the audience will get to see it. At least local people will get to
Yeah,
see
maybe for you to
their
start
own
maybe
harbor
come up
being
with an
displayed
idea.
in it. Exactly. The backdrop to this really kind of intricate, like, human story. Um, and then we said, well, there's a few other films that were shot just around the rest of the county. We should showcase them too. Yeah, let's do that. Oh my god, yeah, let's get together and show
It's
a couple of
organic,
films
kinda organic
that were
idea to
made
start
here.
feeding on itself, and then you're like, "Oh,
Yeah,
not just one, but many films."
exactly.
And
And
then
then yeah, and then the next year we got back together, and showed more films. Um, a film by an Emmy-nominated, Emmy-winning director. And then all of a sudden we had celebrities coming along. All of a sudden the radio was there. All of a sudden the newspapers were covering us. And then this year, which is literally just 2 days ago, so last Saturday,
mhm,
um, we got together for our third year, and we are now partnered with the largest studio in Ireland. Um, and we had the most successful festival yet. And we are still completely independent. Like, there's no like arts council or anybody else supporting us. But the CEO of the studio that made Vikings, um, and is involved with all these major Hollywood productions, was there to present a special prize. So in 3 years, we managed to grow from oh yeah, we should be showing things that we made ourselves, to being recognized, and to kind of the more established, I suppose, industry understanding that yes, showcasing um showcasing the local stories,
mhm.
showcasing the humanity of the place where you're at is so important.
It's still
'Cause
important, it's still relevant, some
yeah,
people try to act like, "Well, you can't win unless you get, like, 1,000,000 views, or
yeah,
you got, like, mil a thou 10,000 subscribers." So they
yeah,
got these people create these expectations, and then people, "Well, I can't do it because I can't play
oh,
with those people."
yeah,
But if you come with, like, a punk aesthetic or this kinda, like, independent aesthetic,
yeah,
like, why not,
yeah,
create an environment for what you love. It's like I we
mm,
you love telling stories that are like local or regional, or they resonate, and they should have a place to be heard or what seen or viewed.
exactly. So, and also to so there was a I'm gonna quote one of the films that we had on show on Saturday. Um, there was a documentary about this old lady who lives in Greystones, and she had words of wisdom to share, and she said, "If you're gonna be doing something, do it. Be in the moment. Even when you're washing dishes, wash the dishes,
Yeah. Do it.
and appreciate where you're at,
Moment you're in. Yeah.
the moment you are in." And that is such a wise thing. That is such a wise thing to say. Um, because we keep rushing around. We're always rushing around. We're like, I have to get this done, I have to get this done, I have to do this, blah, 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 blah. And our lives are so busy, and they're so crazy, and they're so mad. But the reality of just bringing yourself back into a sense of place, which I think was one of the founding ideas of the festival, was a sense of place, and
Mm,
a sense of community, and a sense of no, 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 this is where we live. These are the stories and the things that happen here specifically, that happen everywhere else as well, but not in this particular specific way, which is the Wicklow kind of way of life, which is very unique. Um, so I only lived in Wicklow for about 2 years. I moved away from Wicklow since, but I obviously still go there for the festival and everything, and I have a deep connection to that place. Um, so to be able to celebrate a place for its own sake, Um,
You create a
there's a
scene.
beauty.
You know, you
Yeah,
create a scene, like, you know, if you create a scene and that's what people don't realize, like, you can just make it happen,
yeah,
but people, like, are always talking about what they can't do
yeah,
rather than what is possible, and
yeah.
really what's possible is, like, you just take the step into it, you know?
The I don't understand I don't understand being daunted by something. I don't get it.
I just do it,
I
and
struggle
it's like
so much
you
to
just do it, and
understand.
it's
Just do
hard.
it.
Yeah, well, it's harder than you think because a lot of people, like, they get into the start stop, and
Yeah,
then if they get to the start stop, then they can't, then they feel like, "Well, I'm not gonna get it."
yeah,
Where if you kind it's a I think it's like a trust thing, because a
yeah.
lot of times people don't trust themselves.
Trust
Like,
themselves. Yes,
if you don't
they
trust
don't.
your own artistic ability,
But
then you
what's the
second
worst
guess
thing?
yourself.
Yeah, but what's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that can happen is that nobody sees it, and then nobody saw it anyway.
Yeah,
You
it
know what I
doesn't
mean?
matter. They
It
just put
doesn't
it down.
matter. Put it
Well,
out
yeah,
there, express yourself and create something. And if nobody ever see actually a good friend of mine, I was going through like a difficult phase and I was struggling with finding meaning in it all. And I was like, oh, I just don't know about all this art stuff and it's really difficult. And he sat me down and he said to me, and he's a dear, dear friend, and he's a writer as well. And he said, okay, so what if you never write again? What if you never do anything again? I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I guess." And he said, "You will still have been one of the most amazing writers I've ever known." I was like, "Oh." And then he said, "If you never do anything again, I will still love you as a friend, as a person, as a human being." So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether what you do fails. It doesn't matter whether you are blocked from creating art for years and years and years and years. That doesn't take away from the fact that you're an artist. It doesn't take away from the fact that you've already achieved something that for most people is impossible. It you, we we shouldn't be so hard on ourselves,
yeah,
and it shouldn't have all these like ideas about this is how your artist journey should look, and then you should bring out an album every 3 years, and then you should do whatever. It doesn't that's not how this works,
well,
right?
everybody's
We're
path can be
Yeah,
different,
yeah,
and it's like that. I think the understanding is like people are in a comparison trap. So
yeah,
they feel like if I'm gonna be in this, I have to be like the archetype, right? So I gotta be what's a standard bearer,
yeah,
right? Like what the canon represents, right? But a lot
yeah,
of times I've always gone for the people that weren't. You know what I
yes,
mean? Like Jimi Hendrix is the canon now, but when he was in
yeah.
there, he
When he
wasn't.
was starting out, he wasn't.
He he
He
was the
was
guy that was pushing, the
boundaries. Yeah,
recording engineer said you can't put feedback on tape. And he said, yes, you
yeah,
can.
yeah,
And then they didn't want to do it. So eventually he gets on the board and he starts making it so it's in the recording
yeah,
to
yeah,
the point where he eventually built his own studio because he wanted the sound and there were people trying to tell him he couldn't do it.
yeah,
So well, I'm going to get in charge of the production so I can do it.
yeah. That conviction and that understanding of self and the yeah, conviction, I think, is the only word that I really that I find here. Um, being proud of what you're doing, being in the moment while you're doing it with authenticity and with your true self. And that's like you said, it's hard because those are the moments where your actual soul is on display, right?
Yeah.
Where
And
you
people,
can't hide behind anything. It's your actual just the innermost core of who you are as a person is out there on
raw
display
soul,
and
like your
you're
raw soul's there.
pouring
And
it
then,
out.
yeah. And people
Yeah,
can,
yeah,
people tend to be the haters. And, they said as soon as you do
yeah,
something different, I hate it. Because that's the easiest thing
yeah,
for them to do because they didn't do the work.
yeah.
But they can credit me.
Yes.
But to me, it's like sometimes the haters, like, they're helping you because, like, okay, I
Yeah,
know I'm doing something that is new. because they hate it.
Yes.
So, like,
Or
so
yeah,
I hit the mark. It's like, 'cause
yeah.
now I know it's not if they love it, it's like, well, if these people love it, it's like, I don't even wanna do it because I wanna do something that's beyond where their expectations, and so they can't handle it, then I know I'm on the right track.
Yeah, and also because it's something if if you're going to be disrupting something and stirring up the kind of the soil a little bit. That's what creating something does. It should disrupt. It should change the status quo. If you're not going to change anything, if you're not going to um make people ask questions, whether they are questions of themselves or questions of you or questions of the world, we stir curiosity. We
Mhm.
create curiosity in others, and in order to be able to do that, you have to be really, really curious yourself. You have to be ready to ask yourself some
Yeah,
really
like
difficult
looking
questions.
glass self, like go into the
Mhm.
looking glass self and say, "Am I gonna challenge my
Yeah,
own
you
limitations?"
you have to
Like,
be able to just stand there and look yourself in the mirror and be like, "Oh, this is uncomfortable." And you have to be able to sit in that uncomfortableness, and really, really work on yourself as well. So it's hard. These things are hard, but that's why we do it. That's it's one of the things that kind of keeps me going is whenever it really does get very, very difficult and challenging to follow the path of being an artist. I always remind myself that A, yes, I'm following a tradition that is hundreds of thousands of years old, and B, this is my job. It's
yeah.
not only my job, this is my vocation. This is
Well,
what I was put here
it's
for.
well, I think you're blessed when you're able to do what you love as your job.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And then also this the whole creative process is like what I find is that people ask me like, "Well, how do you write the song?" I say, "Well, every song, different things serve the song."
Yes.
So in certain situations, I might I might go and do a field recording because that
Yeah.
serves the song. I might
Yes.
go jump on a Steinway because that serves the song.
Yeah.
You know, I might use this guitar or this piano
Mhm.
because I don't know what it's going to be until I'm in it. So if
Yes.
I'm once I'm in the song, it's like I'm gonna go use what palette I'm gonna need
Yeah.
to color what my vision is. But
Mm.
once I'm in it, then I start to realize what I want. But I can't like put it into some kind of formula that every song is gonna follow this a 10-step program. Maybe at a high
Yeah.
level, but it's like everything kind of serves whatever
No,
project I'm on.
I mean, maybe on a high level, maybe the formula. I mean, a lot of Hollywood works to go back to kind of film the kind of thing. A lot of Hollywood is very formulaic.
Mhm,
So, I mean, not all, of course, not all things that come out of Hollywood are, but a lot of them are.
mhm.
Um And that's because at that level, you have so much money in there. You have so much investment in there that you kind of can't risk not going with something that has been tried and tested.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
so to write a pop song that has to be a hit because millions upon millions of dollars depend on it,
yeah,
um, you're gonna have to write something that'll be a hit no matter
yeah,
what. That won't challenge, that won't question, that won't push the boundaries because it has to be a hit. And the same with like Hollywood. I mean, I think there's a new Transformers movie coming out or something. The millionth one of its kind. Like no hate on anybody who worked on that film, but like, oh my, really? Do we need another one? Um, but it's gonna make millions. It's gonna make millions because it has to, because it has been designed in such a way that it will. Because it's a different form of escapism, that lets the audience just turn off and escape
like
and
the known
not
yeah, they
be
have these
questioned.
known properties that
Yeah,
people expect,
ex
like a double O
exactly,
Seven movie, what
exactly.
you're gonna get, your Star
You
Wars, you're
know
gonna
what you're gonna
get
get.
yeah,
You know the world you're entering. You which is it's also an important thing
mhm,
for the audience to just be transported somewhere else without having to have their emotions like really brought out and be raw about it and be, challenged. And sometimes we don't want to be challenged. Sometimes we
Yeah,
just want to
sometimes
sit
you don't
down
wanna see
and
the
escape.
critically acclaimed
Yeah.
small, like,
Sometimes
bad
we can't.
film that's, like,
Yeah.
gonna really challenge your expectations
Ex-
because it's not something you ever seen before. Or
Exactly. And that's fine. Or you got to listen to a song that's just easy to listen to. That's not going to make you emotional because right now you just can't be emotional.
yeah,
Um
well, a lot of
that's
people use
fine.
music as comfort,
Yeah.
and so they might be listening to, like, I love the Carpenters, and I think they're
Mm,
really
yeah.
powerful,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's a lot of subtext in what they're doing,
Yeah.
but, like, I would probably go toward that, and it
Yeah.
has some melancholy in it rather than
Yeah.
listening to some of the stuff today, so,
Yeah.
like, if I'm gonna go kinda zone out, I'll go zone out with Karen Carpenter
Yeah.
because I know
But
where I wanna go,
yeah.
but other people might say, "Well, I don't even wanna go there because it's because of that subtext of the melancholy and they know her story." It's like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
can't go there, I want something lighter than that."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and that's totally fine. If you need something lighter, that is also the responsibility of art. That is also the responsibility of what we have to do is to um create lightness, is to create escapism, is to
Mhm.
let people leave the world for a little while. That's also something that we get to do as artists. So, yes, sometimes it's to ask the heavy hitting questions, and sometimes it's to challenge, and sometimes it's to unearth things that have never been seen before. And sometimes it's just taking someone by the hand, taking them to a nice safe haven and just sitting with them there by a river somewhere where the sun is glinting on the waves, and we just want to relax and escape the grayness of the world. um so how privileged and lucky are we that we get to create things that create all of these different pathways for people to experience the world. I mean, that's just what a privilege. Like, we're so lucky.
Yeah, yeah.
um
I think it's just, amazing to be an artist
yeah.
because then you're able to, bring your vision
Yeah.
and, like, even what's cool if you're an artist, like, even if you're working on something that's popular or
Yeah.
something that's gonna be big, you can still kinda throw your secret sauce into it. Like,
Yeah.
you could, like it's like, "I'm gonna still throw these nuggets into it
Yeah.
that still have my stamp," right? That
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw layers into it that maybe
Yeah.
aren't fully picked up by everybody, but some
Yeah.
people will actually pick up on it, and
Some
then you say,
people will
"Hey,
see
I
it.
did yeah, I got that
Yeah.
through."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is why I think to go back to the project we were talking about earlier, Matriarchy, it I got to do that. I got to do that, even though it's like it's a big production with a lot of moving parts, and we when we worked out the story, it was really it was a very clear cut journey that the story was going to go on, because we knew obviously we had the novel, and then we knew what we wanted to do specifically with the story. Um, but I got to work in those little bits that are so close to my heart, that are so close to specifically the topics that I always want to talk about, like masculinity, like, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man. Um, so we do get to do that even on kind of bigger, more formulaic productions or approaches. We don't lose
Your
that spark,
your core.
which
Yeah.
yeah, which and I think this is something we were talking, or we kind of talked about when we were just chatting before. Um, AI doesn't do that.
Yeah,
AI doesn't
that's what
have
I was
that.
kinda this is
Yeah.
where I'm kinda scared for the future of some things because
Yeah.
what you just talked about is the argument why human beings should be at the wheel in
Mhm.
writing and in the creative
Yeah.
area, like, because this is kind of our wheelhouse as
Yeah.
humans, and when people start telling me, "Oh, I don't need a musician, I can just have an AI band and not have any writers," and basically, they're just living off of what's been done before, which,
Yeah.
the guy was arguing, "Well, doesn't a musician just recall all the riffs they're around and change them around?" But,
No.
no, that's not what they do, it's like, from that
No.
you say you're thinking like a mathematician from a
Yeah.
programmer aspect. your algorithm might find a Hendrixian feel.
Mm.
It might find uh, you know, like a Bach feel. It can find
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But the whole secret sauce of a musician, there's a famous thing with like Robbie Robertson from the band
Mm.
actually took a song from People Get Ready from Curtis
Yeah.
Mayfield and he inverted it to make a band song. He
Yeah.
took a soul song and inverted it, and it was his own style. I don't think
Mhm.
AI would ever come up with that.
No.
That's the kind of thing that musicians and artists come up with. That
Yes.
they take an
And
inversion from a different genre
yeah.
and put it from soul into Americana,
Yes.
country, and I don't think they would have the ability to do that.
No, I don't, because it's all just it's regurgitated, and it it's so hard to describe. It's cannibalized.
Yeah,
You know,
it's like the
it's
word
not
for it.
real. It is it is artificial and plastic and soulless. Um and that's not to say AI doesn't serve a lot of other purposes.
It's a tool.
AI is a fantastic tool for physics and math and medicine. And that's where it should
Even
find.
my wheelhouse programming, I mean, it makes
Yeah,
things easier to refine and make things tighter for what
exactly.
I'm trying to build, but I don't know if I want that algorithm playing with my jazz music, playing with my
Exactly.
punk rock music, playing with my funk
Exactly.
music. It's like
It's not
never
That's not
gonna
what
be
it's
James
for.
Brown, it's never gonna be Sly, it's never gonna be Funkadelic, it's never
It's
gonna
not gonna happen.
it's not
The
gonna
thing
do
is,
that.
we need to preserve. I don't even like the word preserve. I think preserve is the wrong word. We need to create a space in which the rawness of humanity isn't underappreciated. I don't want to say isn't untouched, because it should be.
Mhm.
We should be influenced. We should be influenced by AI the same
Yeah,
way that AI is influenced by us, because we should see it for what it is. Um, and let it inspire us to be better, and let it inspire us. Not, I don't mean take inspiration from AI created content. That's not what I mean. I
mhm,
mean meet the moment for what it is. Realize that this is the world that we live in now as artists, and move beyond it. So there was a discussion last year when the writer strike was happening and the actor strike was happening. And I had a conversation with a writer friend of mine. And the thing that we kind of settled on was that, yes, right now everybody's streaming towards AI, and the prestige thing to do, or the cool new hip thing to do, is to just let your script be written by an AI, and then you don't have to pay a writer and it'll be done in 10 seconds. Um, but the prestige of having a human being in the loop, um, even if AI takes over a lot of the things that it shouldn't maybe take over, but one day there'll be a sentence uttered in some boardroom somewhere of like, "Do you know this script was actually written by a human being?"
mhm.
Wow. Like, oh my god, really? A human wrote this? What? So like, that's gonna happen. That's gonna come full circle. We're not going to lose this battle, is my point. It's just
Yeah,
never gonna happen.
but we don't want the tokenization of, art because the problem is,
Yeah,
like, the thing I have a problem with is, like, the AI guys will create tokens and charge for it,
yeah.
right, to create music, and they think it's legitimate for people to have to pay for those tokens.
Isn't it
But then
ridiculous?
they don't think it's legitimate to pay the artist
Yeah,
that wrote the
yeah,
music that the tokens are grabbing.
yeah.
They think they should get paid for
To
their data center
create
and their
whatever. Yeah,
algorithm, but the
the
artist
algorithm.
and
Yeah,
that's the problem because that's when you get people who are
100% agree.
like techies
Yeah,
that start to minimize art across
yeah,
the board
yeah.
and monetize it to their benefit
To their
and
benefit.
demonetize it for the art benefit and then
Yeah,
say, well, we don't need you.
yeah,
That's the mindset that I think that's people are gonna reject that because
I
the
agree.
product of that is like AI art.
The
which
product
soulless, it doesn't
soulless
feel like.
and pointless, really.
Yeah,
I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you. It's just so difficult to, first of all, it's so difficult to make a living as an artist anyway, no matter what
that's
art you
privilege.
follow. If you're not very, very lucky and like have your first hit at whatever 17 and then just keep going, um, you're gonna struggle. Like you're gonna struggle probably for the majority of your career. You're gonna struggle to make money from this. And the biggest problem for most artists is that they're just not motivated by money. We're not finance bros who need to have $1 million in our bank account. We do it for the love of it, and unfortunately, that's easily exploited because we do it for free because we love it so much. And then everybody's like, "Yeah, so go do it for free," which is not good, which is really bad. But so it is a struggle to make a living. Um, and I agree 100% with you is the valuelessness of it, right? It's so valueless because it didn't take anything. It didn't take your 10,000 hours. There's an anecdote about Picasso where a woman asked him for a quick portrait, and he drew one on a napkin in like 10 seconds, and he was like, "That's going to be $3 million, please." And she's like, "Yeah, but it took you 10 seconds. And you're not paying for the 10 seconds. You're paying for the 30 years it took me to get here." Right. Um, so it, the fact that art is not valued for its own sake. Um, and yes, AI has a huge responsibility to play there because it's valueless and it gets misinterpreted that therefore the art that originated it also is.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not. Just because we were willing to do it for free doesn't mean it's valueless. It just means we put so much of our heart and our soul
With
into
heart
it.
and soul, with, like,
Yeah,
human
yeah,
spirit and heart is
yeah,
in it, and when it's just cloned or sampled or copied, it
yeah,
doesn't have that original spark,
yeah,
and that's where people, it's like, "Oh, yeah, I can take this tool and make art." It's like, well,
yeah,
there's a difference
yeah,
between commissioning a artist to draw your book cover
yeah,
and having the AI do your cover. If you actually get an artist to commission to work on anything,
yeah,
you'll get a certain level of quality that the
yeah,
AI, well, you might not understand it. You say, "Well, the AI did it,"
yeah.
but is it really, it doesn't
It's
have
not.
that spark.
Yeah,
It doesn't have that
yeah.
feel. It's
It
soulless, like you said.
it is soul. It is. That's exact. That is the only word I can. That is the only word I can use for it. Is that we
I think some people are figuring it out. I've talked to authors in the
Mhm.
last year, and there was a trend to do the AI cover, but now they're kinda backing off and going back to
Mm.
artists,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
shows you that there's a limitation.
Exactly. The trajectory, like exactly that little anecdote of like, oh my God, this was human made, so therefore, wow, what a prestige object. Um, it, AI it kind of flared up so quickly, and everybody was so absolutely fascinated by it. It was the trendy, hot new thing to do. Um, but the pendulum swings the other way. It always does, and
Yeah,
eventually it finds a balance, and it lands in a place where it will live and it will stay. Um, so we were on this completely like upward trajectory for AI, and I think we're starting to settle more into maybe not healthy, but into a healthier understanding of what it actually is.
getting more like
Especially
a
kind of
tool for
within the
the job.
artwork. Yeah, a tool. Yeah, exactly. A tool to enhance or a tool to do. So a friend of mine is a visual artist, and she uses AI to run through like ideas for composition.
Mhm.
So she'll
Idea.
tell the AI to create like 50 images that have variations on what she wants to do. Um, and then she'll kind of use one of them as inspiration for what she actually and what ends up being the
Idea
actual picture.
generation's a good idea. Like, I've talked to
Yeah,
some people, the idea generation capability is cool if you
yeah,
don't know where to start, and
yeah.
also, like, in production for me as a musician, is like, in sound processing.
Mm,
So I wrote the songs, like, I don't want AI writing the song, but I
yeah,
might allow AI to do some of my plugins
yeah,
and some of my preamps
yeah,
and run through virtual examples of preamps I don't have. right? To
Exactly.
see what it sounds like when I color
Exactly.
my piece of work. So it
Yeah.
didn't write the song. It's a
No,
tool to help me
it's a tool,
embellish the
and that's
song.
exactly what it should be, and
That's the way I look
that's what
at
it's good for.
it.
Yeah, but
I
that's
don't
what it's
want it
good
writing the
for.
song though.
No, it shouldn't be writing the song. It shouldn't be writing the screenplay. It shouldn't be writing the story. But you know, enhancing, or for people who aren't writers, writing a I don't know, a retirement speech
Mhm.
for yourself where you have no idea how to write
Polish.
something like
Give
that,
people
but you're
polish that
expected to
aren't
do it.
professionals. I can see
Yeah,
that.
I get it. I get it. Of course, you're not going to spend 2 hours writing a speech that isn't actually even that important to you, but you have to, and then you have to anyway. Okay, yeah, of course you should. It. Yes, that's what it's for. That's exactly the type of work that AI should be doing,
It's
and it's
kinda like
good.
if you go back to Star Trek and Spock had
Yeah.
AI, right?
Yes,
But Spock
exactly.
was a brilliant guy, right?
Yeah,
But the AI only took him so far. Like, he still had
exactly.
to use his Vulcan mind
Yes,
with the computer and say, "Computer, help me do this," but he still was putting large impact into what the computer was doing. He was running
exactly.
the instructions, and it was still a science officer that
Yeah.
was telling the computer what to do. It wasn't the computer doing it all by itself.
Because that's never going to go away. That human input, the origination of the spark, that moment when always go back to that imagery, the moment when the first of us stood up around the fire and said something, or sang something or danced. That spark, that unbroken tradition, has never gone away,
That's a
and
human
it's
factor.
never exactly.
The
It is
human factor
never
is
going to
I
go
think is
away.
everything
I
to,
agree.
like, life, and if
I
people
agree.
want something like it's saccharine or aspartame, it's
Yeah.
artificial.
It's artificial, and
You'll get
it
the aftertaste, and it's like, "Is
yeah,
something not quite right?"
yeah, yeah, and you're never gonna be you're I it's good to turn your brain off from time to time, but when the moment arrives and you're struck with grief, or you're struck with love, or you're struck with joy, or you're struck with something that is real, the thing that you will turn to is art. You're
Mhm.
gonna read a poem, you're gonna listen to music. You're going to come across a painting that all of a sudden speaks to you in the way no painting has ever spoken to you before.
Or film.
You're going to watch
Like
a movie. Yeah. You're going to watch a movie that makes you cry, even though it's never made you cry before. Um, it is only in moments of heightened emotion that we remember why we need art, why it's so important to have art. Um, so yeah, that is the point. That's the point of what we do. That's why we're
yeah,
here.
we just can't let
Um,
the finance bros take the passion out of art.
no, please,
'Cause they will if they
no.
can. They don't really realize what they're doing. It's like this they're just in their first quarter
Yeah,
profit margin meeting, and say,
yeah.
"Well, yeah, we can do that." But yeah, it's
No,
okay. They can have
let
that
them
warehouse. Let them go
let
do that,
them
but that's they'll
yeah,
find
let
out it
them
doesn't
run
work.
their world.
They know, like, "Oh, it doesn't work that good. Let me get
Yeah,
out of that."
until they themselves hit a wall of grief. I've been around many a rich person, um, and even they who have focused on creating wealth all their lives, when they have a heart attack at the age of 50, they realize, oh, hold on now. I've been
Something else
living all
is
my
important.
life so that I could retire rich, but what am I retiring for? Or they lose a loved one and all of a sudden realize that the time that they had with that person was way too short. And they didn't spend enough quality time with that person. So most people at some point in their lives will hit a moment in which they remember remember their humanity, even though they've been trying to be a robot for
Yeah,
most of their lives.
robot. Yeah,
Um, so and then our job is to welcome them with open arms. Then our job is to hold them and guide them and be there for them and be and give them comfort and give them an understanding of what it is that they're experiencing. Um, So that's what I always think is the kind of the main point of being an artist.
Definitely. I think we've been on the same page on a lot of things,
Yes.
but,
I agree.
time always goes by quicker than we ever imagined. We hit over our hour, but I wanted to mention
Yes.
your website. Like, if people go there,
Yes.
is that how they find out about all the work you've done?
Yes, that's where they find about all my work. That's where they can my all my books are linked there. So I have 3 books out, 3 poetry collections. I have a poetry collection out every year.
Hmm,
So the 3 previous are there, and then if anybody's interested in screenwriting, I have a textbook for screenwriters that's being used in a university here. And I'm also available to help out if anybody's stuck on a story that
you do
they need
consulting?
help with.
You do some
I
consulting?
consult. So
Oh, that's
yes,
awesome.
I help out. So that's all the stuff that I do on the side. Um, but yeah,
That'll be fully clickable for everybody. So
fully
if you go
clickable.
to that www Ronika Mary .com, Merle.com, and you'll be able to click through on that in the podcast description. We were just live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and then we'll be on all the other podcast platforms by tomorrow, where you can listen or watch a podcast. We do appreciate the time you've taken to be on the Family
Thank
Look the
you
Ghost
so
podcast.
much. Oh my
I do
God, thank
appreciate
you. It has been such a great experience, such a wonderful talk. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I know you're burning the midnight oil a little bit, but thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too. Thanks.